Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 79th day of the 108th Legislature First Session. Our chaplain today is Reverend Kate West from Senator DeKay's district. Please rise.
Good morning, beautiful people. Let's take a few moments to center ourselves, to invite the divine into our lives, taking a deep breath, feeling the goodness and the love that is in the world enter our bodies, filling our lungs and our beings, and releasing the negativity, the things that distract us from hearing the voice of the divine in the world. Let us pray. Great love. We are thankful for this beautiful day that you have given us to come together to be about your work in this world, in this state, in this place. Open our hearts and our minds to hear you as you rustle through this place. Help us to remember those who are less fortunate than we are, those who are considered the other and on the margins of society, those who need a reminder that love will always win at the end of the day. God, you take care of our needs, and so we take a moment of silence now to pour our hearts and minds before you. Great Spirit, remind us of our missions and of our goals this day. Help us to support each other and those we represent. Be with those who struggle for any reason this day, that they may have the resources they need to make today better than yesterday. It is all these things and more we pray. Amen. Amen.
I recognize Senator Lowe for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I call to order the 79th day of the 108th Legislature, first session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh has a correction for the journal on page 1518. The M. Cavanaugh point of order was not recognized because the body had invoked cloture. Correction being M. Cavanaugh made repeated points of order. The number should be specified.
Mr. Speaker, I recognize you for a point of order.
Mr. President, if I recall correctly, you've previously ruled that corrections to the journal from the floor are not in order.
I have, Mr. Speaker. Senator Conrad, you were recognized first.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I'd move to overrule the chair.
Senator Conrad, you're recognized to open on your motion to overrule the chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, good morning, colleagues. I appreciate having a point of order recognized this morning. I think that's appropriate in terms of our past practice, precedent, and our rules. I think, unfortunately, that was not the case in the midst of a very pitched legislative debate last evening. And of course, some of that is evident on the record, but not all. I think my colleagues can attest to the fact, as can the presiding officer, and the record is clear, that I do not raise points of order in a willy-nilly fashion. I rose last night in relation to the impropriety of the cloture motion in terms of how it was being handled, and I was not recognized nor allowed to present that information to the record, which was critical from a variety of different perspectives. The presiding officer in this instance, the Lieutenant Governor, does not have the ability or right to not recognize a member's point of order. It is not discretionary. It is fundamental to our rules and, in this instance, to the separation of powers. Additionally, it was important from a procedural perspective and had substantive implications. When the motion for cloture was filed, the only thing on the board was a motion to return to select file, not the substantive amendment. That was not the case in terms of how it was handled. It is not, and it stands in contrast to how matters of that nature have been handled in the past. So I do believe that we as a body, as a collective, have the ability to ensure clarity and accuracy in our record keeping, including the journal. And it's best to take it up as contemporaneously as possible to ensure that we have a clear recollection of any errors in need of correction. So I would ask my colleagues to join me in overruling the chair and ensuring fidelity to our ability as a collective to ensure accuracy in our record keeping. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Conrad, excuse me. As a reminder, on this motion to overrule the chair, all senators may speak once. You may yield to questions. You may not yield your time to other senators. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to speak to the motion to overrule the chair, or if perhaps I should speak to the bills on the agenda so that people can call the question on the bills on the agenda, since I'm speaking on them now when we're not on them. It's so confusing, the inconsistency of this body. Yesterday, in the words of Annie, were plain awful. Plain awful. The voice of the people was squashed repeatedly. Democracy was undermined by the presiding officer and by members of this body. There was a concerted effort to do wrong by the legislature itself and the state of Nebraska. Process and procedure was dismissed, overridden, ignored at every turn for your ill-gotten gains of a victory. And 33 people in this room are completely 100% complacent in all of it. And then with the exception of one, they all scurried out the back door through the construction site. I have never seen such cowardice in my life. You did not have the courage to face your victims in the rotunda, the parents that you are stealing their rights away from, the children who you are harming, the doctors whose professions you are dismantling, the women whose lives you are endangering. You scurried away. And then the likes of people like Senator Brewer go on the radio saying how I'm uncivil. I might be uncivil, but I have integrity on my side. I stood up for the most vulnerable people. I stood up when it wasn't popular. I stood up when it hurt. I stood up when it cost me everything. And the people in this chamber who know better, voted to hurt children, to hurt parents, to hurt the medical professional, to hurt the business community, to hurt the state. And you did it. You did it while also dismantling this institution. I was getting text messages from former colleagues during the end of the evening, Republicans, all of them, numerous former colleague Republicans who were in utter despair, watching people they considered to be moderates and friends and colleagues that they could rely on, disappointment beyond belief. And I told them, call them, tell them what they did. Tell them what they did, because they know it. They know it. They know what they did. They know what side they were on, and they know they were on the absolute wrong side of history, and they destroyed this institution yesterday with their vote and with their actions. Tell them, because they don't give a flying flip what I have to say. They don't care how right I am. They don't care how wrong everyone else is. They are going to go along to get along, and they're going to go with the crowd and scurry out that door because they knew what they were doing was irrefutably wrong. And they couldn't face the people that they were harming. They couldn't face the families that they were harming. They sit next to a colleague and they took her rights away with their vote. Took her rights away. Shameful. Nothing less than shameful. But I learned how to take time off the clock. So kudos to you all for showing me that. I enjoy spending today with you together. It's going to be a fun ride. I can guarantee you a fun ride. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I rise in support of the motion to overrule the chair. I disagreed with the ruling last time when the chair relied upon Masons, and I didn't disagree with his reliance upon Masons. I disagreed with the chair's interpretation of those sections of Masons, which is a relevant distinction because last night in the debate, Senator Wayne attempted to amend the motion to recommit, and he made a sound argument that relied on clear language from Masons that said a motion to recommit to committee is amendable as to which committee it is recommitted to. Mason said that in plain language, and the chair ruled that that was not in order. We attempted to overrule the chair, and this body refused to do that, to overrule the chair on that ruling. And I think it's important that we be clear. The rules do say that first we rely upon our rules, and if they are unclear, then we rely on our traditions and precedent, and we may rely upon Masons. And there are those here who would like to rely upon Masons when it suits them and not when it doesn't. And as Senator Wayne pointed out last night, our rules did not specify whether he could make the amendment that he offered, and that he distinguished from the one precedent that was articulated to him, which was distinguishable in the sense that it was a filed motion to a different committee and not an amendment to a motion that was already on file, which is clearly distinguishable. And so the chair chose not to recognize the authority or guidance of Masons in that context because the chair wanted the particular outcome. The reason we have rules, the reason we rely upon precedent, and the reason we look towards Masons is so we have certainty in how we are going to conduct ourselves. If people come in here and they can skirt the rules, change the rules, we can go against precedent when convenient, we can pick and choose which rules we follow when convenient, then no one knows what's going to happen in here. And we saw that play out yesterday when a previously would have been 2-hour debate became a 6-hour debate because at every turn, we stopped counting time, which has not been something that happened before. On that very bill yesterday, that was up yesterday, when it was on general file, there was a debate about overruling the chair that lasted for hours and was counted against the time. And so the purpose of consistency in the rules is so we are all on the same page and we do not have that scrambling. We had a lot of discussions up at the podium there because people did not know what was going to happen because we are not consistently applying and following our rules. And we have previously in this session allowed for a correction of the journal from the floor. And there is a good argument for allowing for corrections of the journal from the floor because the journal is the record of what we did here, and that it is this body, thank you, Mr. President, this body that has to accept what is the journal. When he reads it across up there and he says, any corrections for the journal, that's for us to say, I've read the journal, I have a problem with it, I don't accept it as written. What is the purpose of our vote on that, accepting the journal, if we have no ability to correct it? How can we know that the record is accurate if there's no opportunity to make corrections and to discuss those corrections? The attempt here proposed by Senator Michaela Kavanaugh is a legitimate correction to this journal. It's clarifying what happened yesterday. And it's important that we maintain that ability and that we follow our rules and that we understand which rules we're following and we apply them consistently so that everybody has a fair opportunity to be heard.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Bosin would like to recognize the physician of the day, Dr. George Voigtlander of Lincoln. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Senator Conrad, I'm passing over you in the queue. You will be recognized to close. Senator Raybold, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, my fellow Nebraskans watching on TV out there. I do stand in support of overruling the chair. But I also want to thank the Lieutenant Governor, our clerk, and our speaker for assisting and giving me time yesterday to work through some of the concerns that I had expressed and some of the inconsistencies that I have observed this session as a brand new state senator. And I am appreciative that you gave very thoughtful consideration to some of the concerns that I raised about the time and tracking time. And for that reason, I think it's so important to make sure that our journal reflects some of the current concerns and items that were raised yesterday that really took up a tremendous amount of our time and deliberations yesterday on dealing with such a weighty matter. And I think that's so important that going forward, if there are things to learn or if there are corrections to be made, then they should be made. And that I think we should, as a body, be able to look back and say, could we have done something differently? Could we have done something better? What were the lessons learned? I know that in the considerations that we talked about yesterday, we tried to go back and look at the journal from previous days to verify or clarify or validate some of the concerns that we were raising about tracking of the time and how motions and points of order were handled in the past, just to create some consistency for the body that will help dispel people's concerns going forward as we continue to work as a unicameral, trying to come up with the best policy that we all care deeply about. And I think for that reason, corrections to the journal are so essential so that we can be more consistent with policy making and decision making going forward. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Raybold. Senator Hunt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Nebraskans. I think it's going to be another long day. It might be a midnight type of day looking at this agenda today. But I support this motion to overrule the chair. How is this place supposed to work if we don't have a way to correct the journal from the floor? I feel like folks keep doing their best, their earnest best, to follow the rules, follow past precedent, follow tradition, follow what we understand the rules to be. And then the way those rules are enforced is unpredictable, inconsistent. And then when we have questions about those rules, or we want to correct the journal to reflect what actually happened in debate for posterity and for the edification of the debates that we have for the people of Nebraska here, it's ruled out of order, or we're told that we can't do it for different inconsistent reasons. If we cannot correct the journal from the floor in the moment in a contemporaneous way, what is the right manner to do it? I have a feeling, based on the precedent set by Lieutenant Governor Kelly, who has been the most inconsistent president that I've seen in this legislature. Lieutenant Governor Foley was consistent. I mean, say what you will about how he ruled on things or what he thought about things or how he put his thumb on the scale for different bills, which he certainly did. As at 10 a.m. out lobbying for something and then at 2 p.m. ruling on it from the chair, but at least he was consistent. And I think that what this belies and betrays is the inexperience of this lieutenant governor, the inexperience of our speaker, and the inexperience of this body that has put people in positions of leadership from day one who are not, frankly, up to the task. Aren't up to the task because they don't understand the rules and norms and traditions of this body, and worse than not understanding them, because you can teach, I mean, you can learn to understand something, you don't respect them. You don't want to understand them. You don't want to do better. Speaker Arch doesn't want to do better. Lieutenant Governor Kelly doesn't want to improve. And what happens when all this goes down this way is the optics for Nebraskans are also really bad. I remember last night, Senator Kathleen Kauth said she gets 2 or 3 emails a week telling her to keep at it. What about the hundreds of emails a day that we get begging us to protect the people and families and children of Nebraska by not passing these bills? That's what speaks to me. And today in my inbox, I was going to read a couple, but today in my inbox, I have dozens, not 3 or 4, but dozens, like maybe 40 emails from Nebraskans who are specifically talking about process yesterday, who are not talking about the bill. I've got hundreds about the bill. I've got maybe 40 from people saying the process was wrong. The way you executed the rules was wrong. And the optics of that for Nebraskans is terrible. I don't want what's happening at the federal level in Congress with the Supreme Court, with all of these things, to infect our civic process here in the state of Nebraska. We're above that. We've never had that before. That's never been a problem for us here in this state, and it shouldn't become a problem just because of the inexperience of this body and the insistence on adding insult to injury with every single win, ill-gotten gain, gotten unfairly, gotten by putting your thumb on the scale, applying the rules inconsistently, throwing the optics out the window so Nebraskans don't even know what's going on. It's nothing to be proud of, and I would encourage you to support the motion to overrule the chair. I know you can do it. I've seen you do it before, you know, when it served you. And that's just one more example of the way this institution has been trampled on by this class. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Arch, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to speak to this point of order. And we've debated this before. We have a process for correcting the journal. When you go to our rules, and people, we do read our rules, the clerk of the legislature shall attend sessions, call the roll, and keep journal of proceedings. We have delegated the responsibility of keeping the journal and making those corrections to the clerk. So for that reason, I stand in opposition to overruling the chair. I believe we have a process. We know we can correct the journal, and it's appropriate for us to suggest corrections to the journal, to the clerk, and that is our process. Now I want to speak to something else, because there is a lot of talk about how we just are throwing out rules on a regular basis, changing rules midstream. I cannot tell you how many times this session people have come to me and said, just interpret this rule this way. And I go to the clerk and I sit down and I say, has that rule ever been interpreted that way? No. No, we've always interpreted it this way. I've gone back to the person, I'm saying I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to reinterpret the rules. The stopping of the clock for procedural motions has been consistent this year, to my knowledge, with one exception on General File LB 574, and that was not intentional on my part. But I understand that the clock management and how that was going to be done yesterday was communicated to a number of senators in this room who, after, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 hours, raised it as an issue, as though nobody had ever heard about that. that the clock was going to stop on overruling the chair on procedural motions. My understanding is that was communicated. What is inconsistent this year, and I find challenging and troubling, is that rules now are being pushed into new uses never done before. So we say, we don't go to Mason's manual. We have our procedures, precedent. We have those things that we have done. And sometimes we have not used them in that way, and that is precedent. So we don't use them that way. But the rules this year have been pushed and pushed and pushed to new uses. That's where I find the inconsistency. We aren't looking at precedent. We aren't looking at past history. There's a new twist to this rule. There's a new spin that we can put on this. And I have resisted that from the very beginning of this session. I understand how important it is that it is predictable, that we know how to manage and use our rules. Use, hopefully not abuse, because frankly, you can't write enough rules. We could have a summer session of just nothing but rules, and the book could be about that thick. And there aren't enough rules when people don't want to follow the appropriate use of those rules. And I'm not speaking to anybody in particular in this body, but that's the challenge that falls on me, is the consistent use of rules. So to those people that are standing up today and yesterday and saying, we just change the rules anytime we want to change them. Not true. Absolutely not true.
1 minute.
But what is happening is the pushing of the use of rules that have never been used for that purpose. And now suddenly we find ourselves being challenged with the use of those rules. That's where we are. So with that, I'll stop there, but I rise in opposition to overruling the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Arch. Senator Dunggan, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I do appreciate the Speaker having a conversation about this. As I've noted before, and many of us also in this room we're new. And so I think that there's a little bit of a lack of knowledge, for me at least, as how things have been done in the past. And so when I look at these rules and when I try to determine how they operate, I do go to the rule book. And that was one of the things that was hammered into us during orientation, was read the rules. They tell you that over and over. And then I've learned a lot about Mason's manual since we've been in the body. And so I know we had a little bit of a discussion about Masons yesterday. And my understanding in the rule book is that if there is ever anything that is silent as to the specific thing you're looking for, that you may and historically have referred to Masons in an effort to sort of flesh out some of the questions we may have, or I guess clarify. And the reason for that is our rule book is not always the most clear. It can, for example, give you the overarching rule that pertains to that subject, but it doesn't get into some of the nitty-gritty of what questions you may have. And I think that's where we oftentimes get into our debates is, you know, in this particular nuanced instance, how does this work? Or how do we answer this particular question? And so I did look at the rule book with regards to the modification of the journal. And I do respectfully disagree that it can't be modified from the floor. My understanding is that the clerk does have the ability to modify the journal, but I don't believe, at least based on my reading of that providing that duty to the clerk then removes that duty from the body. And the reason for that is my reading of that rule in section 19 is that it gives the clerk the right to do that, but in that language, it does not specifically prohibit the body from doing it themselves. If you look at Mason's rules, and I believe it's section 700, which is the authority to correct the journal. Senator Wayne pointed this out previously when we had this debate, but subsection 1 of section 700 says the right of a legislative body to correct its journal is an inherent right that does not depend on the Constitution nor upon statute. Goes on to say that each house of the legislature has the power to correct its journal prior to final adjournment. Obviously, we only have one house here. But it does go on to outline sort of the process and procedure within which the legislative body can correct its journal. But it's that first section. The right of a legislative body to correct its journal is an inherent right that does not depend upon the Constitution nor upon statute. And so, although it does appear that we have delegated to the clerk the option of modifying the journal, the clerk has that ability, I don't believe that giving that ability to the clerk means that it is prohibited that the body can do that. If there was a specific rule saying that there can't be any motions to modify the journal from the floor, then I think that would maybe be a lot clearer. And if that was the intention of the rules, then I think that can be something that's clarified moving forward. But certainly the way that our rule book is currently written, it does not appear to be prohibited. I do share concerns about the rules being followed in a consistent manner. I also understand that yesterday was incredibly hectic, and I understand there was a lot of things happening. And so I do applaud, again, the staff and also presiding folks here for doing their best to try to make sure that these things are followed. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult, but I do believe that these are good faith conversations that we're having with regards to whether or not the rules are being consistently adhered to. And I do think it's important for us as a body to continue to strive towards application of the rules that is across the board consistent with everybody and across the board consistent with each individual bill. And so, thank you, Mr. President. Again, referencing Mason's and our own rule book, I see nothing that prohibits us from having modifications to the journal from the floor. And in fact, given the fact that it is the inherent right of a legislative body to correct its journal, I don't see any issue with that. I'm happy to continue having conversations about it with anybody else. But I would urge my colleagues to vote yes on this motion to overrule the chair, as I do believe we as a body have the right to modify our journal. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to close on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I appreciate the dialogue and debate that we've had this morning in regards to this important issue. And I just wanted to add a few additional reflections and citations to the record so that is clear. So from a constitutional perspective, we have the ultimate authority to set our own rules in the Nebraska Legislature. You can look at Article 3, Section 10, and that's crystal clear, that the legislature shall determine the rules of its proceedings, period. We came together after a fairly rocky start and a very robust public hearing with, I think, well over 100 Nebraskans who stepped forward to share their ideas about process and dozens of rule changes. And we were able to find some consensus to preserve our traditions and integrity that ensures majority rule, but also protects minority rights, to ensure some continuity in terms of our rules overall. And while everybody lost a little and everybody gained a little, we came together working really hard with the Rules Committee and the Speaker, and we adopted rules unanimously together. We made an agreement with each other that was the set of rules that we were going to work within and under, as is our right and authority under the Nebraska Constitution. So I would additionally note I have a sincere disagreement with my friend Speaker Arch when he says we don't engage in willy-nilly changes to the rules, for example. That's just not clear, colleagues. You can look at the record and you can see midway through this year, Senator Erdman put forward a rules change in regards to motions. You all adopted it without a public hearing as required under our rules. That's a fact. So we do change the rules willy-nilly midstream when it suits our purposes. And you decided not to follow our rules, which you could have accomplished the exact same thing with a slight delay by engaging a public hearing. But nonetheless, you chose not to in contravention of our rules and traditions. Additionally, there has been a clear indication that we count time differently for different purposes on different matters. And that was important to be drawn out because it matters in terms of the procedural and the substantive results. So we saw happen yesterday, what we've seen throughout the session was an exertion of raw political power. Questions regarding sincere and important questions regarding germaneness, don't care. Sincere and important issues that are constitutionally required regarding single subject entitled, don't care. Our rules, which require bills to be introduced within the first 10 days and be subject to public hearing, absolutely did not happen. If 626 is dead, the amendment you adopt yesterday is new matter in regards to abortion policy. It was not introduced as a bill, and it was not subject to public hearing. So when you say we don't change the rules willy-nilly, that flies in the face of the record and experience that we shared together over the past 70-odd days. So in closing, I will let the record be clear that while there is no specific rule in regards to recognition of a point of order, our precedent, tradition, and custom has always been to recognize one, And the point that I brought forward was not dilatory, thank you, Mr. President, but was in relation to the motion on the board and the impropriety of how the cloture motion was called. If you look additionally to Mason's Legislative Manual, Chapter 14, Section 150, it provides a fundamental right, colleagues, a fundamental right for a member to raise a point of order. And it says, points of order are presented to the presiding officer for determination. The ruling on points of order may always be questioned by the body on appeal and the question decided by the body itself. We should not ever cede our ability and authority as a collective to determine our own rules, and we should not cede that to the presiding officer. Additionally, if you look at Mason's Legislative Manual, Chapter 22, Section 234, you will also see the explanation of the duty of the presiding officer to recognize and immediately take notice of a member's point of order. It is not discretionary.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd urge you to overrule the chair.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Members will proceed to the vote on the motion to overrule the chair. Request for a roll call vote, and it takes, with 4 members excused, it would take 24 votes to overrule the chair. 23 votes. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, voting no. Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Ballard, voting no. Senator Blood, not voting. Senator Boston, voting no. Senator Bostar, Senator Bostelman, voting no. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Breezy, voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, not voting. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator DeKay, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dungan, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting no. Senator Frederickson, Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Hansen, voting no. Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Holcroft, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hunt, not voting. Senator Ibach, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting no. Senator Kauth, voting no. Senator Linehan, voting no. Senator Lippincott, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator McDonald, voting no. Senator McKinney, voting yes. Senator Mosier, voting no. Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Raybold, voting yes. Senator Riepe, voting no. Senator Sanders, voting no. Senator Schlama, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Walls, not voting. Senator Wayne, Senator Wishart, not voting. Vote is 7 ayes, 33 nays, Mr. President, on the motion to overrule the chair.
The motion to overrule the chair fails. Mr. Clerk, for items.
I have no corrections for the journal, Mr. President.
Mr. Clerk, for the first item on Senator Kavanaugh, please state your point of order.
I submitted corrections for the journal.
Senator, there was just a ruling by the body that those were out of order. We're proceeding.
on the adoption of the journal.
Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar. Not voting. Senator Albright. Not voting. Senator Arch. Voting yes, Senator Armendariz. Voting yes, Senator Ballard. Voting yes, Senator Blood. Voting yes, Senator Boston. Voting yes, Senator Bostar. Not voting, Senator Bostelman. Voting yes, Senator Brandt. Voting yes, Senator Brewer. Voting yes, Senator Breezy. Voting yes, Senator John Kavanaugh. Not voting, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Voting no, Senator Clements. Voting yes, Senator Conrad. Voting no, Senator Day. Senator DeBoer. Not voting, Senator DeKay. Voting yes, Senator Dorn. Voting yes, Senator Dover. Voting yes, Senator Dungan. Not voting, Senator Erdman. Voting yes, Senator Frederickson. Senator Holleran. Voting yes, Senator Hansen. Voting yes, Senator Hardin. Voting yes, Senator Holcroft. Voting yes, Senator Hughes. Voting yes, Senator Hunt. Voting no, Senator Ibaugh. Voting yes, Senator Jacobson. Voting yes, Senator Kauth. Voting yes, Senator Linehan. Voting yes, Senator Lippincott. Voting yes, Senator Lowe. Voting yes, Senator McDonald. Voting yes, Senator McKinney. Voting no, Senator Mosier. Voting yes, Senator Merman. Voting yes, Senator Raybold. Voting no, Senator Reapy. Voting yes, Senator Sanders. Voting yes, Senator Slama. Voting yes, Senator Vargas. Not voting, Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes, Senator Walls. Not voting, Senator Wayne. Senator Wishart. Not voting. We're just 32 ayes, 5 nays on adoption of the journal.
The journal is adopted. Mr. Clerk, for first item on the agenda.
Mr. President, some items first. New LR 179 from Senator Arch. That'll be referred to the Executive Board. LR 180, 181 from Senator Slama. Those will both be referred to the Executive Board. New LRs from Senator Clements, LR 182, 183. Those will both be referred to the Executive Board as well. Amendment to be printed from Senator Raybold to LB 531. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, for first item on the agenda. No. If all senators could find their seats, we're on final reading. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, final reading, Speaker Priority Bill LB 813. First of all, I've got a motion from Senator Michaela Kavanaugh to return LB 813 to select file for a specific amendment, that being FA 121.
Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you're recognized to open on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just for everyone's knowledge, when you voted for the journal, as it was, you voted for an extremely inaccurate journal. But maybe we're okay with that. I mean, did I black out last night when Senator Albright made the motion for cloture on Senator Kauth's bill? Because we didn't go to my corrections for the journal still says that Senator Albright made the motions for cloture on Senator Kauth's bill. But bygones, right? Who cares about that stuff? It's just the permanent record. Just because you don't like me doesn't mean I'm wrong. But there we go. Okay, so this is going to be a very long day because we are on final reading. Great scheduling to have final reading after yesterday, where everyone has to sit in their seats for the 2 hours. And then the next 2 hours, and the next 2 hours, and the next 2 hours. But hopefully we find ways to take time outside of the bill so you all can get up from your seats. So that'll be fun, won't it? It will. Yesterday, when we were on final reading and I was sitting in my seat and I wanted to look at the queue, and you're not supposed to get up from your seat, so I went old school. I used the telephone. Phones on your desk, they actually work. If you dial 250, you get the president's desk. And I don't remember which pages were up there, but thank you, whoever was that continually was reading me the queue, because I did not want to get tackled by Charlie, the red coat. He was being very patient with me, but I was definitely pushing the limits of his patience by not staying in my seat. So I thought I should follow the rules and stay in my seat during final reading, because that's what you're supposed to do. I like to follow the rules. Push them, sure, but I follow them. That's part of the reason that yesterday was just so, if you want to do things the right way, there's a reason that we have our order and our structure and our rules and our rule book, and then Mason manual to fall back on. There's a reason for all of that. And that reason is that that's how it works. That's how we all are playing on the same level of playing field. If you are to achieve your goals, you should be able to achieve them going through the process in the proper way. And when you have the majority, not just the majority, but the 2/3 majority, you should absolutely be able to achieve your goals going through it the proper way. If you have to lie, cheat, steal to get your outcome, you should really ask yourselves, should you be doing this? And if you have to exit through a construction zone, you should ask yourself, should you have voted that way? I remember a couple years ago, Senator Brewer and Senator Slama making fun of me for being upset over guns in the Capitol and me introducing a gun bill and having people with loaded guns sitting behind me because I felt threatened by that. I exited through the door that everyone else exited through. I entered through the door that everyone else entered through. There actually is a back exit out of the judiciary room that I could have probably asked to take, but I didn't. I exited to the parking lot, as I always do. And I expressed on here my fear for my safety and well-being. And I was mocked. I was mocked by the same people who exited through that door and went through construction because they couldn't face their victims. And one of those people got on the radio this morning and called me uncivil. Why do I point it out? I don't know. Why not? I'm taking up time. I may as well air my grievances, right? Today is the Festivus of the legislature. Feats of strength, mental strength. I listened to the prayer this morning, and and I don't oftentimes listen to the prayer, and I actually was not planning to listen to the prayer this morning. When I heard that the person was from Senator Decay's district, I honestly wrote them off and thought, well, great. This is just going to be more speaking to the lying liars of this and assuaging your guilt of all the things, but it wasn't. So that's bad on me, prejudging. The minister this morning said exactly what I needed to hear, and exactly what you all probably should hear, but I'm certain didn't. That love is love. And love cannot be defeated. And then she asked us to be silent and reflect. And I reflected on how much I love the children of this state. All of them. And how much I love them for who they are. And how much I want them to love themselves for who they are. And how much I want them to feel like they matter, that they're worth fighting for. I reflected on how much I'm going to fight for them. And that just because this body failed them yesterday does not mean that I failed them, and it does not mean that I will fail them, because I will not. On February 23rd, I got on this microphone and I made a speech, and it ridiculously went viral. And for better or worse, that put a target on me in this body, because you couldn't let me have a win. A win. I lost on my birthday, on January 17th of 2023, when LB 574 was introduced. I lost. On February 8th, when we had the public hearing, I lost. On February 22nd, when the HHS committee voted LB 574 and LB 626 out of committee, I lost. On February 23rd, when I had strep throat and I stood on this floor and I made a speech that went viral, I lost. I have lost every single day. And if the bill yesterday had been defeated, I still would not have won. This has cost me time with my children. This has cost me time with my husband. This has cost me time with my friends. I have a friend out of state who's actually never been to Nebraska, and she's going through a horrible divorce. Horrible. And I'm not able to show up for her in the way that I normally would.
1 minute.
This is costing me on every level possible. And I am going to continue. I'm going to continue for the remainder of this session and the next. I'm going to continue as long as I'm here and that there is a threat by this body to do harm to children. I am going to continue. Because the cost to me is great, but the cost of not doing it is greater. Trans children deserve our love, our support. They are worth fighting for. And I am going to fight for them. Every minute of every day that I am in this chamber, I am going to fight for them. And you choose to be on Senator Kauth's side in this fight, that's your choice. But it comes with consequences, and they will be severe.
Just a reminder, even though we are on final reading, the motion before us is to return to select files, so members are allowed to move around the chamber. However, you cannot leave the back glass doors or the side doors. Senator Slama, you're recognized to speak.
Good morning, colleagues. All right, I'll bite. If you want to get up this morning and complain about procedure, that's fine. if you want to get up and be sad about how a vote didn't turn out yesterday the way you wanted, that's also fine. But don't you dare get up here and spout about cowardice when senators chose not to incite a mob of hundreds of angry protesters that not only were packing the rotunda, but were blocking every single entrance out of this building. Don't you dare spout about cowardice when we had senators leaking where senators were evacuating to so that the angry mob could go catch them there. I would love to know why senators' locations were popping up on Twitter last night and tweets encouraging groups of people to harass senators as they ate, to get up and trash their houses. The comments that were made on the floor yesterday, we didn't engage with. We didn't bring in the thousands of pro-life Nebraskans. We didn't bring in the thousands of people that really would prefer that you not cut the genitals off of their children, because we didn't want to incite a mob. We care about the people who keep us safe, and we respect them, and we respect our colleagues. We respect that they have people to go home to that they care about. This is beyond anything that we're debating on the floor. This is about looking to your left and to your right and giving a damn about that person and that they have lives outside of this place. You know what? LB 574 is alive today because of Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. She is the reason that bill is still alive. The first two rounds of debate on LB 574, that bill had 30 votes coming up on the floor. But then Michaela Cavanaugh got up and ran her mouth because she was just overjoyed that the national media was here to give her some more attention. So that gave us 33 votes. Like, this bill is alive because of Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. It is probably going to pass because of Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. That just needs to get on the record, because Senator Michaela Cavanaugh has spent her time lying this morning about what Senator Brewer and I said. I called Senator Michaela Cavanaugh out for lying about what Senator Brewer said back in the day. I pointed out that he had 2 Purple Hearts because he served our country honorably. I did not lie. I did not make fun of Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. I'm not going to play this revisionist history game anymore. Somebody's going to get hurt. And when that happens, that is on the people who yesterday took time to incite a mob, to anger them more, to get them more riled up. Because thank God no one got seriously hurt, because that would have been on each and every single one of you who urged it to happen, who wished it to happen. You've called this legislature an embarrassment, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. You are the one who is an embarrassment to this legislature and to this state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Clemens, but thank you, Senator Salama. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to FH 121 and the motion to return to select file. The bill on the board is LB 813. The motion FA 121 simply says to strike section 1. Section 1 is the definitions of the appropriation periods, and the bill uses abbreviations like FY 22-2023, which means July 1 of 2022 through June 30th of 2023. This is a bill that we call the deficit appropriation for the current year, which goes through June 30th of this year. And striking section 1 would be detrimental to the definitions and the purpose of the bill. And the LB 813, we've debated a couple of different times. The primary things you'll find in it are Health and Human Services had a number of software IT expenses, renewing of licenses. They had one termination of a software contract, which is going to be later today in the claims bill. This is the funding for that, but the approval for it will be in the claims bill, that $5.5 million to the Wipro company settlement. And then the other major part of this is going to be corrections had a major increase in pay for their officers, and the total the general fund's effect of LB 813 is about $31 million. There are some additions and subtractions that happened in those items. We had the Appropriations Committee received a handout. It was about 13 pages long, and we went through all of those one at a time, approving almost all of them and passing over a few. And so the return to select file would not be appropriate for that amendment. That was going to damage the integrity of the bill. And I would appreciate a red vote on that amendment. And if people have questions about the bill itself, I'd be glad to discuss that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Strike section 1. It's the definition of an appropriation period. I've actually argued this previously. Strike it or don't strike it. If you strike it, it's really intent language, and we already know what our appropriation period is, so does it really need to be there? It's like the serial comma. Is it necessary? No. Does it provide clarification? Yes. Should we keep it? Probably. But I'm a lover of the serial comma, and I like clarity. So I appreciate Senator Clements being in opposition to striking it. Clarity is important. Helps us navigate the world. Rules are important. Clarity in policy is important. Consistency is important. So, okay. Where is it? Oh, I think, did this get distributed yesterday? Yeah, okay. So yesterday there was, oh, I'm sorry, it has your initials on here. Senator Frederickson distributed a comparison of AM 1658 and AM 1474. AM 1658 sets Nebraska up for lawsuits. AM 1658, this is Senator Hansen's amendment that you all so wonderfully voted for, mandates similar bans on gender-affirming care that have been blocked in other states. An Arkansas court has blocked Arkansas from enforcing its ban on gender-affirming care for children. The Eighth Circuit Court, which includes Nebraska, has rejected Arkansas's efforts to revive the law. Federal courts have also blocked a ban in Alabama that bars minors from receiving non-surgical care, such as puberty blockers and hormones. Additionally, Tennessee has been sued by the U.S. Department of Justice over their ban, and also sued by 3 transgender children and their parents. In addition, a Missouri judge just this month blocked the AG's sweeping restrictions on transgender care before they were able to take effect. You know, one would think that we would want to make sure that when we pass policy that it is going to stand up to mustard and not be fought so ferociously in the courts, and with it being telegraphed very clearly that it's probably not going to fare well. So it's going to cost us a lot of money, and we're going to lose. One would think that this body would care about that when we're so singularly focused on tax relief. But what I have learned in this year's budget is that we're totally cool wasting money, wasting taxpayer money, because we can just steal it from healthcare pots of money. So we can lawsuit it up. Lawsuit it up. I'm sure the TANF Rainy Day Fund can cover these court fees somehow. I mean, this does impact children. Maybe some of the trans kids that are impacted will be at 50% of the poverty level, and then we can use the TANF Rainy Day funds to pay for the court fees to try and destroy their lives. AM 1658 is gender-based discrimination. Procedures outlawed in AM 1658 are based solely upon an individual's gender or sex. The amendment doesn't ban a procedure, it provides a ban on who can receive a procedure. This kind of discrimination is additional grounds for lawsuit.
1 minute.
AM 1658 is ambiguous. AM 1658 authorizes the chief medical officer to adopt and promulgate rules and regulations to provide for non-surgical gender-altering procedures for individuals younger than 19, such as puberty-blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, or both. This delegation of power within statute is ambiguous. AM 1474, the actual compromise amendment that I still hate, but is an actual compromise. AM 1474, I think I'm almost out of time, so I'll just read that one on my next time on the mic. Cool. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. Senator Moser, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraskans. I feel compelled to talk a little bit about what happened yesterday. I don't agree with the synopsis of what happened that has been presented by other senators. The rules were followed last night. The rules may have limited debate, but following the rules throughout the entire session has limited debate and discussion and the progress of bills. If the rules don't allow enough debate, then let's change the rules. Or if the rules allow too much debate, if they allow somebody to speak for hours, days on one topic, maybe the rules should be changed. But I don't think that our decisions that we make in this body should be determined by who shouts the loudest. That's wrong. That's not the civilized way to govern, to bellow at the top of your lungs. You know, there were some events on January 6th where the crowd was upset about some of the things the government did, and some politicians incited those people, allegedly, to protest, and some of those protests got out of hand. And last night, from this floor, members were quoting and acknowledging chants of protesters in the rotunda. I think that incites more bad behavior. I don't think that that's good for the process. I don't think that's being respectful, collegial, however you want to describe it. I understand the passion of those people, but that's not the way to express it. Most of us left by the back door last night because we didn't want to confront that crowd. Why would you want to go out there and incite them to who knows what they may do? They were out of control. They were shrieking at the top of their lungs, crowding up against the glass. When you're trying to resolve conflict, the last thing you want to do is confront somebody. You want to de-escalate the conflict. You want to get away and let people cool down and let the sun come up another day for you to consider, how we move forward. But there was nothing cowardly about leaving without walking the gauntlet through that crowd. What if the crowd had grabbed somebody? What if they had pushed somebody? What if two people had just bumped together accidentally and started a scuffle? Then the state patrol would feel compelled to get involved, and they'd come in and try and break it up. And it could have wound up badly. Somebody could have gotten hurt. Could have been a senator, could have been one of the protesters, could have been one of the state patrol. That's not the way to govern. It's not the way to govern. We talked to the speaker about filibuster rules because filibusters were being used to delay things, and it was obvious we weren't going to get things done that we wanted to get done, and the speaker stood up for the rules. Arch said, I'm not going to change the filibuster rule. And I told him, if you cut it in half, we'll get twice as much done. He said, no.
1 minute.
So we have rules, we followed them. The rules aren't perfect, but if you don't like the rules, then we need to change them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moser. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I wanted to just flag a few items that I was hoping to spend a little bit more time talking about and debating this morning as I was doing a final review of LB 813 last night after we adjourned. And I had a chance to just briefly talk with our colleagues that sit near me, Senator Vargas and Senator Wishart, in regards to some matters, and just gave a very, very brief heads up to Chair Clements in regards to a few items that I thought might be helpful to redirecting some of our debate to some of the critical substantive issues before us in LB 813. So if you look at that, you can see that there is important intent language and important appropriations components related to how we handle child care reimbursement. And it reflects an ongoing process where we do a survey of child care providers in Nebraska to figure out kind of what that market rate is. And then we kind of set our rates to figure out how to ensure our child care providers that receive state support and families that receive work supports can stay open and accessible and competitive in attracting workforce. So I do want to draw the body's attention to that this morning. There's also some language in regards to perhaps reallocation or reappropriation of some ARPA funds. And I do think it would be helpful if over the interim or at some point we had a more clear and comprehensive understanding of how much is perhaps unallocated, how much is unexpended. I understand that most of the ARPA funds have been actually allocated, but perhaps have not been expended. And there's key upcoming deadlines in 2024 and 2026 that we need to be aware of and make sure that we can be nimble to fully utilize our federal reserve dollar or federal relief dollars to the greatest and highest purposes. There's also a component in the legislation that relates to some of the initial distributions for the opioid settlement that I've talked about before that I think are important to readdress, and a pretty significant amount of reappropriations for HHS administration and corrections. I'm very pleased that Senator Clements did provide some additional information about why there was such a significant reappropriation for corrections, and that was to address, as I understand it from his commentary, the negotiated compensation increases for frontlines corrections worker, which I think are very, very important. So I have an amendment filed later that is substantive as to the child care market rate survey and the allocations related to that, but I just wanted to raise that as well. Because we're going to have some time together this morning. So perhaps it would be good to refocus on what sounds to be a common thread through very divergent and very challenging conversations and issues. But if there is some sort of common ground and consensus on ensuring child welfare and child protection, okay, let's go. Let's make sure that we have the best state in the country when it comes to having, starting, or expanding a family. Let's make sure we have the best resources available to ensure that kids are in a safe place when their parents are at work. Let's make sure that we have access to a strong safety net so that moms who decide to start a family or expand a family have a little bit of extra help for postpartum care. You say, and I take you at your word, that your convictions compel you to protect the children, then meet us in the middle and let's protect the children. Let's protect the children that are here. Let's deliver for working families. We have made modest very modest but important gains through Senator DeBoer and Senator Bostar's work on child care this year. We haven't lifted a finger on poverty allowance for schools. We haven't lifted a finger for school meals. We haven't lifted a finger in terms of strengthening the social net more broadly for postpartum moms. If we're going to protect children and family, even if we have significant disagreement and will remain in disagreement. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak, and this is your last time before your close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm struggling with it, like, ooh, so much to unpack in some of the comments, but I think that the comments, they speak for themselves. So I don't need to unpack other people's comments. All right, AM 1474, the compromise amendment to LB 574. I would like to just acknowledge, I do appreciate the honesty with which Senator Ben Hansen spoke about this yesterday, because he never called it negotiations. Never called it negotiations. It was a listening exercise. It was presented to all of us that you were negotiating, but it wasn't actually negotiating, and I appreciate that honesty. You didn't try to dress that pig up. All right, that's mean to pigs. I love pigs, especially little mini pigs. They're adorable. Sorry to pigs. Okay. AM 1474 does not set up Nebraska for a lawsuit. AM 1474 is constitutional. What? Let's start there. That's bananas. What? Senator John Kavanaugh, you started with constitutional? Get out of here. That's not how we do things. It's constitutional because it sets forth specific and strict standards that must be met in order to receive gender-affirming care. Avoiding a total ban leaves Nebraska constitutionally compliant. Again, I don't know where you're coming at with this constitutionality stuff. We like the courts here in Nebraska. We like spending the taxpayer dollars on frivolity. AM 1474 does not discriminate based on gender. Well, where's the fun in that? If we're not discriminating based on gender, then what are we doing? Am I right? Unlike AM 1658, there are no bans within AM 1474 based on a person's gender. Well, that's just bananas. If we can't discriminate, what's the point? Right? That's why we're passing LB 574, because we are dying to be discriminatory. 33 people in this chamber want to discriminate. Don't come at them with a compromise that eliminates the discrimination part of it, that eliminates the unconstitutional part of it. Don't do that. That's stupid. Sorry, I love you. AM 1474 sets clear standards of care. Under AM 1474 does not leave important questions to the chief medical officer, but rather provides clear and direct restrictions regarding standards that must be met for someone under 19 to receive gender-affirming medical treatment. LB 1474 ensures that parental consent is always required and sets forth diagnostic criteria for healthcare providers to follow. Among other strict standards, putting these standards directly into statute protects all children regardless of their gender. I mean, get out of here. We have an option to do exactly what Senator Kauth says she wants to do, is constitutional, alleviates a significant amount of the opposition from the medical community, doesn't take away parental rights.
1 minute.
Why would we do that when we could just pass a turd instead? A Skittles sandwich, as it were. Why would we do that? Why did you even bother with that? That's just bananas. That's just bananas. You created an opportunity for the people who lied to our faces and told us that they didn't like the bill and they needed to see certain things happen. You created an opportunity for them to do the right thing, and they didn't take it. Of course they didn't take it. They lied to our faces when they said, this is a bad bill and I don't want to vote for it. And they voted for it numerous times, 3 actually. And then they're going to vote for it 4th time. And they actually have the opportunity to adopt AM 1474 because it's still filed. So when this bill comes back on final, there will be a motion to return it to select for this specific amendment. So you all get that opportunity.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. Senator Blood, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I stand opposed to the return to select file and in support of the underlying bill. And to be very honest, it was not my intent to speak today. Yesterday was a very long day. I would like to see us make some progress. But with this said, there are things that I think need to be said. For those of you that like everything to be more controlled and neat, democracy is certainly not the government for you. And the reason it is often messy is because everyone who wants to participate actually can participate. Some are emotional. Some are rational, some are angry, some are sad, but whatever they are, they have the right to feel that way and share with you why they feel that way. You know, I have respect for Senator Brewer, although I've bested him a couple times having my name in his mouth, and that's okay because he's entitled to his opinion and I treat him respectfully. But he has fought for their right to do exactly what they did yesterday, as have many other veterans on this floor. Now, they don't have to agree with the fact that people exercise those rights, but nonetheless, I thank Senator Brewer and others for protecting my right to do what happened yesterday. It is our job to protect their constitutional rights, as Senator Brewer and others have done. If we are protecting the First Amendment rights, that means we protect their right to assemble and to express their views through protest. To compare it with January 6th, there's a difference between a riot and a protest. And if what Senator Slama said was true, and I don't know because I've blocked many of you on social media because you're not my constituents, and some of the things I saw were very hateful at the beginning of the year, and I just didn't want to see it. So if indeed people were telling your locations or supposedly home addresses, well, shame on them. That's not appropriate. However, what happened yesterday was appropriate. They have the right to assemble. They have the right to express their views, as they did in the balcony up there and the balcony up there, regardless whether they're for or against these bills. And like the Second Amendment that you all feel so very strongly about, you don't get to cherry pick which parts of the Constitution you like and you don't like. You don't get to cherry pick the Constitution. I've had conversations with a couple of you on the floor. You guys may be surprised to know that I don't really give a damn if somebody open carries or not. My concern is always, it always seems to be the people that say that they're scared of like trans kids and that's why they're open carrying in the Capitol. I don't get that. I don't think people that are scared of things should have a gun. That's the wrong reason to have a gun. I think that that's a weird brain perspective, but that's a whole nother discussion. But you don't see me talking about that when we talk about the guns, because that's my personal belief and my personal concern. Senator Mosher talked about them not being civilized because they were yelling. But again, that was a rally, not a riot. And to say that they were pressed up against the glass was ridiculous. There was state patrol there making sure that that didn't happen. And maybe it felt that way because we're kind of in a fishbowl. And I'm sure that you felt a little compressed. But to talk about what if this would happen or that would happen, do you know how many times I've walked out to crowds of people when I voted against what they wanted?
1 minute.
Lots. As have senators that came before us that voted on a lot more controversial issues. If you feel so strongly to vote yes or no against a bill and the people that you are concerned might not like that vote,
are out in the rotunda. We have security, we have state patrol, but this constant what if this happened or that happened is kind of childish. Let's put on our big boy pants and face those that you may oppose or support, because that is part of our job. Like it or not, I had people walk to me outside the Capitol. I didn't know if they were friend or foe. And my response immediately was, how could I help you, sir? How can I help you, ma'am? It wasn't like, oh, whose side are you on? Because I got to know before I can talk to you. We're better than this conversation.
Time. Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, good morning, colleagues. I was just preparing to bring forward some substantive amendments to help direct our deliberations this morning in regards to the importance that perhaps we can find common ground and consensus in relation to childcare. In continuation of my past comments, to my friends and to my colleagues who say with passion that they want to ensure that each Nebraskan is treated with dignity and respect, and that they are not pushing these measures from a homophobic or transphobic perspective, then join with us to create a culture of belonging for all Nebraskans. Let's pass strong non-discrimination laws to ensure that no Nebraskan is denied a job or housing or education because of who they are and who they love. I'll take you at your word. We have time. We can do it together. Is it empty rhetoric or is it real? It's up to you to accept the challenge. I'll look forward to seeing your names as co-sponsors on those non-discrimination measures, and I'll look forward to working with you to find vehicles to move them forward this session. I also want to add a quick reflection in regards to free speech. When it comes to free speech, then I'm probably as close to an absolutist as you'll come, and think that it is a precious right that must be protected. And the founders were onto something when they made it the First Amendment, the most important, the bedrock from which many of our other rights, fundamental rights, derive. The right to petition your government, the right to organize, the right to associate, the right to speak shall not be infringed. And we have equally strong provisions in our state constitution, as most of our sister states do as well. So I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's not my job to tone police other members here. They have a right to represent their constituents as they see fit, to engage in debate, personal or policy-based, as they see fit. And I'm not going to undermine the association, the organization, and the speech that happened in regards to these measures, not just yesterday, but throughout the entirety of the session, from the introductions to the public hearings to each rounds of debate. We almost closed our legislative doors again yesterday, colleagues. And there's a clear constitutional provision that we do our work in public. And Nebraska has a strong and proud tradition of open government through our open records laws and our public meetings laws and the rules of this legislature. And you know what? Free speech is inconvenient sometimes. And sometimes it feels really, really intense. But the reason that speech was happening was not because of procedural points of order. It was happening because legislation seeks to undermine the dignity, autonomy, civil rights, and human rights of women, families, and trans youth. And it's part of a pattern and practice in a national playbook that's sweeping our country. That's at the heart of the expression. And even though we sacrifice, and even though this is challenging, thank you, Mr. President, I'm not going to complain about the honor and opportunity to serve my state with each of you in this august body. Because you know who has really hard jobs? Little kids that are working in meatpacking plants, and we haven't lifted a finger to protect them. You know who else has really hard jobs? The moms and dads in my district and your districts that because of unemployment, because of a lack of a social safety net, are working multiple jobs with little to no benefits and having to make heartbreaking decisions every day about how to put food on the table, about how to ensure their kids are safe, about whether or not they can accept a raise if they lose their safety net. And we have, undeniably, from a North Star perspective, a worse start. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to speak.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I have several things bouncing around in my head, but the first thing I want to do this morning is say at least how much I appreciate and several others in this body appreciate Speaker Arch. He has had an incredibly difficult job this year. This is my 7th year, and I have never heard so much name calling, personal attacks, out and out rudeness, and threats. So how do we start this year? This is how Senator Arch started. He was told he would do this or else by a handful of senators. Not the majority. Actually, the majority, whether it was 33 or 25, didn't agree what a handful wanted. You will act that or we will filibuster every bill, which you have. He has been pleaded with from the right, both inside and outside the legislature, to change the filibuster rules. He has refused to do so. I know it's hard to lose. I've lost a lot of times here. But you had 33 senators yesterday that agreed with a bill. And I've never seen, when you get that, it's over. I also want to thank Lieutenant Governor Kelly. Very difficult position to be in, first year at the job, and managed us through it yesterday. I too have missed a lot of time with grandkids. But we're going to plow through. Now, as for statements that this legislature has done nothing for kids, I'm astounded. We've just passed, or about to pass, the biggest school funding bill that we've done since, I don't know when, probably since 1980s. We're going to cover 80% of special ed kids, which we have been fighting for since my class, since we got here. As far as the poverty allowance, I've worked on that several times. So here's the reality about the poverty allowance. The schools it would help would be Omaha, Lexington, South Sioux City, I'm going to forget some, Hastings maybe. It's where there are really a lot of poor kids. Well, you know what? There's a couple, 3 big schools, large schools that always have at least 21 senators who don't want us to move the poverty allowance because it wouldn't help them. So if you want to take on that fight, and I know Senator Wayne does, I'm all in on that fight. But understand, you're going to have some people who have constituencies, school districts in this body that are not going to be happy with you because they're very happy the way the poverty allowance is right now. Some of the things that were said on the floor last night were utterly ridiculous. But calling us out that we're not doing our jobs, I'm tired of it. And the idea that this is the first time the legislature's debated abortion,
1 minute.
that is just simply not true, not even close to truth. They have been debating abortion since I've been involved in politics, which I really hate to say this, but 30 years, 30 years. On April 13th, 2010, when the 20-week abortion bill passed, it was Senator Flood, now Congressman Flood's bill. It was a 44-5 vote. We have had debates in this body over tough issues every year I've been here, but the behavior is significantly different. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Moser, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning again, colleagues. Am I the only one that sees the irony of the senator who's responsible for 90% of the filibusters here complaining about missing time with her family? We can debate the issues in calm, reasoned ways, vote, and move on. We don't need to push our weight around by filibustering things just to take time. We've all missed times with our families, our businesses, our friends. You know, the older I get, the more precious time is. As far as facing the crowd going out of here, I've been in politics for 17 years. I've been yelled at. I've been called names. I've been sworn at. I've been so close with people yelling at me that their spit was flying on my face. I never hit anybody, never pushed anybody, and I stayed cool. But going out into that crowd after the vote would have been insightful. There's no reason to do that. When you have conflict, you don't go out and duke it out and yell at each other, and who knows where that could wind up. We've got the power. Yeah, we've got the state patrol. They would come out there and defend us, but why risk that? Why take that chance? Why take that chance? I can lift one end of a 500-pound piano. I'm not afraid of those protesters, but why start a fight and start something that ends badly? For what reason? It's not going to change the result. We can't legislate based on who yells the loudest. I don't care if it's protesters in the lobby or if it's senators on the floor. Reason, common sense, those things have to rule. Yes, the rules have been stretched some ways here and there, but yet they are your rules. If you don't like the rules, change them. You know, the filibuster rule allowed a lot of time to be taken. One day we had a bill up and there were 4 or 5 priority motions made, and between the openings and closings, nobody else could speak. No amendment could be offered. Was it within the rules? Yes, but it had never been done. Is it collegial? No. Does it help the process? No. And then they wonder why there's polarization in here. This started the very first day. One of the senators was questioning somebody on the Committee on Committees. Did you or did you not call so-and-so and ask them if whatever it was? I mean, what is this, Perry Mason? Collegiality is lost. I hope we can get it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moser. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I have a little different perspective because, you know, I grew up in a biracial household where my mom's from a small town, Iowa. So conservative, far right, left, far left, progressives are in both of my families. And And Thanksgiving and Christmases are always a little interesting around politics. But the consensus of everybody I talked to last night was that nobody actually won yesterday. We all lost. And I don't think people can understand that, because this entire session in this body has come down to two words for me: egos and selfishness. Egos of we can't let them win on both sides. We can't reward bad behavior. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard that when I was fighting for North Omaha. The selfishness because we can't wait to tweet, to post something, to go back to our constituents and say we have dug in and we are not moving. And on display, and it's not just about the bill, the entire atmosphere last night, we lost. I could argue that a 12-week was a win for many progressives. I can argue that the amendment was a win. But we can't sit down and have real conversations. Last night I went home and I was trying to figure out words to make this sound right, or make what happened here give me a little bit of hope back in humanity in this place. There are some really good friends that I have on the other side. And at times we can figure out how to work together. And at times, I've told people on the other side, don't vote for my bill on this. You can ask Merv, my first year down here. Because I understand politics. And you can ask Senator Linehan when she would come from having a meeting. I'd be like, you're not voting for this bill. Because I understand politics, but we're going beyond politics. We have entered this place at winners at all costs. And I hope the last few days we're here, we can get some work done and set aside our egos, set aside the selfishness, and actually help out Nebraskans. I mean, think about this. We're in national news not because of a bill we passed to attract the biggest and brightest students, to retain people here, to move corporations here to create more jobs. We're in national news because we're fighting about rules that sometimes we change. We're fighting about issues that are divisive. And I'm not saying those issues can't come up. But that's what this entire session has came down to. Nobody's moving here. Corporations are looking at us saying they're not coming.
1 minute.
Some of our biggest events may pull out of Omaha. Then what do? Your property tax relief comes from many of our state and local income taxes and sales tax. We have to start figuring out how to get in a room and find balance on a lot of things. And I hope we can do that. I hope nobody else on this floor makes a personal attack. And I'm not going to stay up here and say I never did it. I think I did it every time with Senator Groney. But we got to do better, including myself. So I'm willing to work this last week, 2 weeks, and figure out how we get something done. I hope everybody else is. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to close. Excuse me, Senator Hunt, just push the button. Senator Hunt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Linehan said in this article on April 11th, 2023 in the Nebraska Examiner. Higher than anticipated fiscal note may require trims and proposed income tax cuts. Main sponsor says some adjustments were to be anticipated, but has concerns about fiscal estimates. In the article, she said, Linehan said if trims are needed, part of LB 754 could be delayed. She said that perhaps a tax credit given to companies that provide childcare programs could be pared back, something Breezy said he would not support. Colleague, Senator Linehan is so dedicated to helping poor kids that she offered cutting the child care tax credit instead of a $3.99 income corporate tax rate. That's how much she cares about kids. She cares so much about kids that she wants to drain tax dollars that go to support public schools that serve everybody, including gay kids, including kids with two dads, like our colleague Senator Frederickson, including people who have trans kids like me, and raid the coffers to divert all of these money to religious schools that she thinks are better. She took us to a tour of all these religious schools, and they were not better. They were not better, and the principal and superintendent of these schools could not answer my questions about if they allow gay kids. And when I said that, Senator Linehan rebuked me. She goes, Megan, like, don't ask these bigots about how they're bigoted. Get out of here. Why you invite me to this tour when you know this is my top issue? Why isn't it everybody's top issue? This bill that we passed yesterday, taking away care from trans kids, which Senator Slama does not mean cutting off their genitals. That's not what's happening to kids in Nebraska. That's not what's happening to kids anywhere in the country. That's not the standard of care. But when you say things like this, it gets people really scared. It gets people really like feeling a strong emotion, but you're describing something that doesn't even happen. And then you've got all these people voting for a bill that is literally not needed. It's harmful to people. It's like passing a bill. You're passing a bill to take away health care from a group of people. It would be the same thing if we introduced a bill saying, we cannot give health care to anybody with brown hair. We can't give health care to anyone with a left foot and a right foot. We can't give necessary health care to anybody who was born in Hastings. Like, it's just who people are. All of you would think that that's ridiculous. All of you would think that that's discriminatory. And it is. Senator Linehan and Senator Moser sort of said the same thing. Oh, when you lose, it's over. When it's over, it's over. You guys can't really say when you have 33 votes, it's over, when you didn't have 33 votes on a previous round and Speaker Arch said it was over until Governor Pillen came in and whipped him into shape. Governor Pillen came to Senator Walz's place of work in Fremont to shake her down, to say nothing of what he did to Senator Reapy. Who's intimidating? Who's using intimidation? Is it the people out in the rotunda who are standing up for their rights? Or is it your governor who's interfering in the separation of powers to get his way to discriminate against Nebraskans?
1 minute.
It's not over. When you lose, it's not over. It wasn't over for you with 626. It's never been over for you, and it's not going to be over next year. Senator Reapy thinks he made a deal. He's got some cover. Next year, we're going to work together to take away criminal penalties for this abortion ban, this 10-week ban, not a 12-week ban. We are never going to have 25 or 33 votes to take criminal penalties out of this abortion ban next year. That's not realistic. That's not going to happen. If it's not going to happen this year with this legislature, it's not happening next year. And Senator Hansen is not going to be amenable to something like that. He loves this bill. He wishes it went further. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. And you are next in the queue, so you're recognized to speak.
Thank you. When I left yesterday through the rotunda like a normal, non-scared person who's not afraid to face my constituents, first of all, I would die of embarrassment if my constituents thought that I wasn't able to face them. When you guys had some gun bill a couple years ago, and my office was downstairs, like right below where we are now, in the west hallway. The overflow rooms for the gun hearing that day were right next to my office, right next to where Senator Moser and Senator Brandt were and Senator Merman were in that hallway. And there were guys with long guns standing outside my office, staring me down, blocking the door to my office. Did I go out the back entrance? Did I have my staff pull my car around? No, because what are you going to do, shoot me? What are you going to do, bump into me, as Senator Moser said he was afraid of happening out there? They know I wasn't going to support that gun bill. They're going to shoot me about it? I wasn't afraid of that. You guys are afraid to get bumped into by some queer teens out there? That's what you're describing. That's what you're afraid of. There were people with guns out there. They weren't on my side, I'll say that. Perhaps they should be. But if people on my side were the ones that were armed coming in here with long guns into the Capitol, we'd have some different gun laws real quick. Trans people are under attack in this country, plain and simple. It's dangerous right now in this country and in Nebraska to live outside the gender binary, to question this stuff, to even look like you're outside the gender binary. I hear you people talk about teachers with blue hair, teaching kids Marxist stuff or whatever in school. And this is just anti-queer coded comments. Trans people are under attack and LGBTQ people are under attack. In the most recent tally, the ACLU tracked nearly 500 anti-LGBTQ bills in this country, introduced in state legislatures all over the place. So when I say this has never happened in Nebraska, Senator Linehan, I'm not talking about an abortion ban. We've had abortion bans before and we've defeated them before, fair and square, but it wasn't over for you, was it? Didn't have 33, but it wasn't over. What we haven't had before in Nebraska is this kind of unprecedented attack on trans healthcare. We've never had an anti-trans bill before. We've never had a bathroom bill that anyone in the legislature would have taken seriously. All these Republicans who used to be in here, who all of you respect, and if we didn't have term limits, you would be kissing their butts because they'd be the ones in charge and you'd be like, oh, please put me on a committee, whatever. They're texting us last night about how devastating it is what you guys are doing to this institution. And I said, don't bring that energy to me. Don't text me and vent about it. Text your friends. Text Senator Brandt that. Go tell Senator Riepe that. Go tell Senator Hughes that. All these people you were so excited to have come into the body to maintain the respect for this place that you have so much reverence for. Don't bring that to me. Go tell the people who need to hear it. This is what we have not had before, and this is this breakdown of collegiality.
One minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's just irreparable. It's irreparable. To me, it's like if you voted for a bill saying you can't get health care if you have a left foot and a right foot. You can't get health care if you were born in Blair. You can't get health care if you have 2 or more children. It's just who you are. It's just a thing about life. And you know this. Senator Riepe knows this. Senator Hughes knows this. Senator Brandt knows this. There are people in here who have taken tough votes, and you are not among the ranks of those people, and I don't respect you. When I was out in the rotunda last night, when I walked through, I started saying this earlier, when I walked through, this person, I was sort of looking straight ahead at first, and then to my left and my right, this kind of path is opening to let me walk through. And people are holding my hand, shaking my hand, trying to pat me on the back and hug me and things like that. Crying parents, crying kids.
Time. Thank you, Senator Hunt. And you are next in the queue, so you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. And one person, as I got about halfway through the crowd, a little shorter than me, gave me this big hug and just started sobbing into my chest in that way like you've felt before, you know, and I'm holding them and I'm kind of stroking their back and they're just violently sobbing into me. And this person told me that they had tried to take their life during this legislative session. This was probably over 18, maybe like 20 or something. And they told me this in my ear. And they thanked me for everything we've been doing to fight for them and their rights, and Senator Kavanaugh too. Did anyone say that to you guys on the way out of the secret entrance? Did anyone thank you for everything you've done for them? I told that person, this person said that they had attempted suicide during this session in Nebraska, a trans person. And I said to them, do not let one of these trash people who I work with be the reason that you're not here. They don't matter. The potential you have for the rest of your life is so much bigger than the damage any of these trash people can do in their little 4-year, 8-year term. The world is big. There are more places for you to go. If Nebraska isn't the place for you, you have to put yourself and your health first. That's what I said to them. Don't let one of these garbage people be the reason you're not here. I think that when we talk about trans life, we have to also talk about trans joy. We have to talk about trans going to the grocery store. We have to talk about trans, minding their business and not being bothered by lawmakers when they're just trying to live. And I hate this focus on suicidality and depression. Senator Kauthis stood up and said that trans kids are suicidal and depressed because they're trans. No, it's because of bullies like her who are trying to legislate their existence and take away the right to be viewed as fully human in our culture and society. That's why they're depressed. If we just left them alone and didn't do all this, we'd be having a nice time, wouldn't we? We might even be done by now with this final reading worksheet. We'd all be having a nice time. And you could still hate trans people. Senator Kathleen Kauth would still hate trans people. Several of you could still refuse to take tough votes and, go, oh, it's hard to be a senator. It's so hard. I didn't know it'd be this hard. It's never been hard for me to go out and face my voters. It's never been hard for me to face them down, whether they're blue hair or whether they're holding a long gun. And no, you're not doing your job if you're afraid of that, and I'm not afraid to say so. Me calling you trash is not the same thing as losing your human rights. It's not worse. It's just words. It's not like a vote that takes someone's rights away. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Lowe, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator Wayne, that didn't take long. The name calling is back. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the people of Nebraska. The senators who stood up and fought for our youth, we've just been called trash. I walked out with the rest of the senators out the back door over here at the left of the chamber. And I walked down through the halls with them. And then I realized I left my computer up here on the floor. So I started back up here. And I found a couple other people that had lost their way, so I led them back through to where they needed to go. And then I came back up here. I walked up here and I thanked the Redcoats for standing up for the senators here on this floor. I thanked the staff for them being here and putting up with everything that had to happen yesterday. And then I walked out the door. I walked through the crowd. And yes, I did get yelled at. And that's about it. I got yelled at. I was not afraid of them. I never have been afraid of them. Because they throw words. Words you should listen to when they have meaning. If they don't have meaning, words don't hurt. It seems like we run on emotion here anymore. Will this hurt my feelings? Not if it's right or not. It's about feelings. And should I do this because it's politically correct? It's not about what's right or not. And what we did yesterday, 33 of us believe it is right. And that's it. That's all. But the vote has been taken, and it's time to move on with our work today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just asked Senator Clemens if we could get back on track here and actually talk about the bill that's on the board instead of all the other things that seem to be coming up. So would Senator Clemens yield for a question?
Senator Clemens, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. What exactly does this, what are there, 4 appropriations bills, 3, how many appropriations bills do we need to get through here?
5. We have 3 today, 2 tomorrow.
5, okay. So what does this bill do?
This one adjusts the budget for agencies who have a difference in what they projected starting with 2 years ago, and they've had expenses that were unforeseen, or sometimes we had some savings. I could just, if you look on, go to page 74, if you have your Martian Green Book, it has a narrative about it, and then starting on page 76, there are general funds, cash funds, federal funds, revolving funds, and some salary limit items that were adjusted. For example, the homestead exemption. The homestead exemption is something that we estimate how many people are going to turn in a homestead exemption. And this time we had reimbursements of $119.5 million, which is lower than the $121 million that was expected. So we reduced by 1.8 million the appropriation for the rest of this fiscal year, which I think was really pretty close. We do a pretty good job of estimating. The major costs that we had referred to before is in Health and Human Services, where they ended up with needing to update some computers, buy some more computer software, and then in replacing that software, they also had terminated a software contract with a company that we had been working on for a few years, never did get the software contract regarding signing up for Medicaid or estimating Medicaid benefits, and that they had a $15 million lawsuit against the state, and the state settled it for $5.5 million. We thought the state position was they never did perform on their contract, but that's how settlements go, and that the funding is in this bill. On the schedule today, you'll find the claims bill from Business and Labor that has the authorization to pay that claim. And the one other major item in corrections, we added the negotiations with the staff in corrections in order to be able to hire staff where they had a lot of vacancies and shortages. On page 77, it shows per diem payments of $12.8 million increased and salary increase of $12 million. And so that's kind of an overview of what we have. There are, a few other items.
1 minute.
Thank you. State colleges, affordable housing, site and building development, universal service fund, Department of Transportation, unemployment insurance, and TIOSA all had some adjustments, some some up and some down, but that's totaling $31 million, and that has already been on the green sheet. The amount available to the floor, the $31 million has already been taken out.
Okay, thank you, Senator Clemens. So I guess we all should probably, if we're going to be on this for 2 days, we should all find where our green books are. I saw some pull them out of their desk. I think mine is down in my office. And I was, oh, look at all those green books. All right. So let's talk about the budget. Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Senator Clemens.
Thank you, Senator Lenahan and Senator Clemens. Senator McKinney, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was sitting there and then I was listening to Senator Clemens talk about increasing wages for correctional officers. And I was thinking in my head, I was like, well, why don't we increase wages for incarcerated individuals inside of our institutions? For multiple reasons. Number one, they are not slaves and they shouldn't be paid $1.21 an hour or less unless they work in a specialized position. Secondly, inflation has went up, and a lot of those men and women inside of our correctional facilities are struggling with paying for commissary, paying for calls, and those type of things, but we're paying them slave wages because we treat them as slaves. And according to the 13th Amendment, we can, which is a problem. But they are not slaves, and we should be raising the wages of incarcerated individuals if we're going to build prisons and raise the wages of their overseers. It's stuff like that that we should prioritize as a state. Because the effects of an individual in prison not being able to pay for commissary, pay for calls to talk to family, it don't just affect them. It affects their families. It affects our society. But we overlook that because we view people that are incarcerated as bad people, criminals, they got what they deserved and those type of things. And that's a problem. And it honestly speaks to why we have all these issues in our nation, because we have a lack of humanity for people overall. We can't see people as individuals. We only see them as what we deem them as because they made a mistake. And in doing so, we are treating them like slaves, literally, by paying men and women $1 an hour. It is a huge problem. And I think in one of my bills I introduced this year, I asked that, they be paid at least the minimum wage of the state. I'll keep pushing for that because I think we should do it. And if we're on this for 2 days, this bill specifically, I might put an amendment up just to raise their wages because I think it should happen. I think it's inhumane to pay men and women $1 an hour to work for Cornhusker State Industries so we can have fancy chairs in this body while they basically slaved away. Why we make license plates, they make license plates for us, and the state charges a bunch of money for license plates and registration, but we're treating men and women like slaves. So if we're going to raise the wages of the overseers, we should also raise the wages of the individuals who are making these products, who we're treating as slaves, literally. That is a problem. We have a humanity issue in this country and in this body. And y'all can disagree with me all y'all want, but it's true. We have a pure lack of humanity for people, and we're treating men and women that are incarcerated currently as slaves, literally. The 13th Amendment should take that provision out of it, and our state should try to be a leader in something and not a leader in having a lack of humanity for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I think one of the things that I'm just going to give you a strategy that I use, I think my second year, that's probably one of the most effective tools of building relationships is I got on the floor during a filibuster and passed out a sheet of my district, a map, and I walked through my district. And every year, Senator Halloran hands out the little thing. So I'm in District 13. I'm going to kind of tell you about my district a little bit. But I do think at Executive Council, Legislative Council, since Trevor's on the floor, I think, one, we should do it in Fort Robinson. And two, we should have senators go through their legislative district so people can know who they represent and where they come from. So the reason people say I'm in the middle is because I have the most diverse district in the state. From income level, I have 2 homeless shelters down by the airport, to a recently passed Walter Scott, but his son still lives there, Mike McCarthy. Those who know Chip Davis, Manhattan Steamrollers, founded, lives in Ponca, which is interesting because for those who are in the hip hop culture and like modern day music, every once in a while you'll see a private jet fly into Epley, which is also the airport in my district, of some of the most talented musicians, rap artists, country singers in the world, and they go to his studio and cut songs and help make music there. So besides the Ponca, rolling Ponca Hills, which are very, very beautiful, I have Omaha Country Club. Me and Omaha Country Club have and that's improper grammar for those who are transcribing, me and Omaha Country Club have a unique history. I used to swim at Mountain View Swimming Pool, and we used to swim against them competitively. And we had a diving competition, and they didn't like the fact that we had so many black kids. And they wouldn't come to our pool because on 66 and Hartmut, which by no means was like the middle of North Omaha, they felt unsafe and didn't want to go down there. But I have a unique history of Omaha Country Club is because that's where from the 70s to mid 90s where most of the deals were cut in Omaha. It was that and Happy Hollow. So you had meetings there and you saw all the famous cars going up there and all the famous people from Omaha, the big wigs. And it was kind of like, I want to be like them in Country Club. Then you go down to Florence, historic Florence. By the way, there's still a ugly green metal, I can't even call it a retaining wall that I have been trying to change for 7 years. Talk about bureaucracy in our Department of Roads. But Florence is a historic place. It's one of our oldest, not Bellevue's older, but one of our oldest villages. And it goes back to Mormons. And that's where they stopped for a really, really cold winter. Why do I bring that up? We have over 1 million, close to now it's about 1.5 million of travelers who go up to their, what they would consider their sacred ground and tour it. So we have a huge tourism just in Florence by itself. So that's a very, very, very short snapshot. I will tell you about Raven Oaks. That's the area that I live in now. When OPS started recruiting teachers and principals from the South at historically black universities, that's where they started to place people. So Raven Oaks had a very biracial and black culture right in the heart of, right on the edge of Ponca, right next to Country Club. Kind of ironic in the 80s. Then you had my little neighborhood, which was by Hartman Elementary, which was really ironic because between Springville, Pinewood, and Hartmut, it's less than a mile, and we have 3 elementary schools that are completely different. So from income to diversity, and now my district holds the largest Mermans, not Mermans. I'm looking at Dave Merman. They used to be Myanmars, the Kerns. I don't know the proper name now because I don't want to be disrespectful to them. But we have over 5,000 of those individuals refugees who have came here. So I'm not in the middle because I want to be. I'm in the middle because my district's in the middle, and I represent my district. So I think it's very important that some of us, especially when you first get here, you don't know where people come from, and you don't spend time going on a mountain or hanging out and talking to them. So maybe we ought to try that next year at our legislative council, as people can figure out where people are and where they come from. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Lanahan, you're recognized to speak, and this is your third time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think, Senator Wayne, could you yield for a question?
Senator Wayne, will you yield to a question?
Reluctantly, yes. I don't know what you're about to ask me.
I think it's Corinne.
Corinne? Current. I might have said it wrong.
No, I don't know for sure.
I don't know. I will find out here shortly. I'm going to get like 6, 7 text messages.
Okay, thank you. I know that because one of my children, I think it was when she was with Lutheran Family Services, worked a lot with that community. That's a community, talk about, they were stuck in, and I'm going to mess this up even further, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure, hopefully my daughter's watching and she'll text me and tell me I'm telling the wrong story. But they lived for years in refugee camps, years. And I can't remember, I think I remember, but I'm not going to make a mistake. But the refugee camp was close to a border of another country. And they didn't really belong in the country the refugee camp was in. So at sometimes the host country would turn their backs while rebels come in from the other country and killed people. So they grew up, children grew up with mothers and fathers laying across them at night when people would attack so they wouldn't get killed. Sometimes it's good to remember just how lucky we are to be here. And we're not perfect, and we make mistakes, and we have discrimination. But we should and do hopefully strive to make it better every day. So back to the budget. So on page 17, we have our general fund appropriations. So where do we spend all this money? $5.34 billion. Well, it seems in 24-25, $758,877,840 will go to the university and state college systems. Good investment, I think. Health, these are agency operations, I'm sorry, so this is operations budgets. Health and Human Services, $354 million. I'll round it off. $355 million. Correctional Services, $353 million. Courts, $227 million. State Patrol, $86 million, actually $87 million. Retirement Board, $63 million. Then we can go to state aid to individuals and others. Medicaid, $1 billion. So out of 5.3 billion, 1 billion goes to Medicaid. Child welfare aid, 198 million. Public assistance, 198 million. Excuse me, that's just developmental disabilities. Public assistance, 86 million. Behavioral health aid, 85.3 million. Children's health insurance, 26.7 million. So that's all the children that aren't covered by other insurance. And I've talked to Children's Hospital before, as I'm sure many of you have. Many times when children come to Children's Hospital, they don't have insurance, and that's when they get signed up for our state plan that covers children. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think
1 minute.
In the last 4 years, our CHIP program in our state is one of the more generous of the nation. We cover dental, we cover glasses, we cover things that we don't have to cover by federal law. Nebraska Broadband Bridge Act, $19.8 million. You can all read it for yourself. We do a lot in the state for people, and I think it's unfair to the taxpayers and the citizens of Nebraska to get up here all the time and say somehow we're not doing anything for anybody. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan and Senator Wayne. Senator Holdcroft, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't pass up the opportunity to speak about the most important part of the budget, which is the $10 million for the South Sarpy County wastewater treatment. Some people want to call it sewer treatment, but I prefer the term wastewater. And let me just give you a little history behind about the project. There is a ridge. First of all, Sarpy County is the smallest county by area, but the third largest by population, and only 40% of it is actually developed. There's a ridge that goes from the northwest part of the county to the southeast part of the county, and everything south of that ridge is not developable because of there's no wastewater treatment. So the county recognized this, and initially they thought about building a sewer treatment plant in the south part of Sarpy County, but Omaha actually approached them and said, we have excess capacity in our treatment plant, which is just south of Bellevue, and so why don't you just pump the wastewater over the ridge and into that plant. And so they, with the help of the legislature, they formed up an interlocal agency, which is actually composed of the Sarpy County Board and six cities, Bellevue, Papillion, Springfield, Gretna, La Vista, and Omaha. And this agency was formed and actually hired a couple of people to oversee the project. It's really 3 phases of a project. The first part is it takes care of the kind of the western part of Sarpy County, mostly around La Vista, Papillion area down to Springfield, and then the second part, which is and the first part and the second part are currently in production. They're more than shovel ready. They're actually burying pipe, and it runs to the eastern part of the county and into the treatment plant, which is just south of Bellevue. So this will immediately open up developable properties around Bellevue and also around Springfield, north of Springfield. So it's well on the works, and then they were working along very well. The whole project is about $280 million, but unfortunately, with inflation in the last couple of years, increasing prices, they came up about $60 million short to finish the project. And the most important project hasn't been started yet. It's kind of in the middle, which will really open up South Sarpy County, 27,000 taxable properties, and it will over the next 30 years, we'll bring in $11.7 billion with a B in increased income tax and sales tax in the area. So it's an investment. It's $10 million in investment with an $11.7 million return over the next 30 years, and that's, I believe that's why the governor included it in the budget. So the project is waiting the center for this funding. Initially, we had a request for $60 million. Went to the Natural Resources Committee, and they pushed back on that, and we reduced it down to 15, which will cover the interest on a loan, and the whole project was to be funded by development costs. So as developers came into the area and purchased land, there would be a fee. Thank you, Mr. President. There would be a fee to tap into the sewer system, and then there would be sewer hookups also. And the whole project is supposed to be self-funding. However, with we really can't. Until we have the financing in place, we can't finish the third phase. So that's what this $10 million does. And it was again, it was $15 million, and then they dropped it to $10 million. But I'm sure we'll find a way to finish the project. So I'll yield the rest of my time, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Holdcroft. Senator Hansen, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Anytime we get a chance to talk about the budget, always look forward to it. I appreciate Senator Holdcroft bringing up his wastewater treatment plant and his $10 million. That's important to him. You know what I didn't get? $10 million for Blair Water Treatment Plant. So I just had to put that out there for you. And it's okay. I'll find a way one way or the other between now and next year. Will Senator Wayne yield to a question?
Senator Wayne, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
What was it? I kind of caught part of it. What were you saying about somebody taking a private jet into your district?
Oh, so we have one of the best music studios at Chip Davis has one of them. And so Jay-Z and others have flown in to record songs with him or he helps them sometimes.
Okay. In my district, I know we have the Blair Airport, and I think they're looking at actually diverting some of that airway to the Blair Airport for private jets. So they may actually be starting to go to my district now pretty soon. And so I hate to take that away from you, but
I have a bill on that to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, as I figured. Thank you, Senator Wayne. On a side note, I do want to just give a shout out to the Appropriations Committee and all the hard work they've done on this budget. Their fiscal responsibility by them, by the governor's office, and their recommendations. So I know it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time and effort. I didn't think Senator Clements could get more gray hair, but I think he did going through this whole process of being the chair of that. And so I appreciate all the work that he's done because, you know, it's a stressful job. And one thing I also do want to mention is I do appreciate the governor prioritizing those in the DD community and appropriating more funds towards that, and the Appropriations Committee for also looking at the DD community and the work that needs to be done to make sure that those providers get rate increases, because they are really doing the yeoman's work that a lot of us don't really understand about what they actually do and how much time and effort they put in to take care of those individuals who have a hard time taking care of themselves. One thing that I think that Senator Michaela Cavanaugh and I actually agree on, which we don't agree on a whole lot, but our passion for the DD community and what we can do as a state to help them out. One of the things that I do appreciate from the Appropriations Committee is their allocation of $2 million to the old Dana campus that we have in Blair that is now run by Angel Share. In case some of you don't know about Angel Share is actually the facility that took over the Dana campus is refurbishing it, which takes a lot of work since we had the hailstorm years ago. But they are a facility that actually houses and helps educate and workforce development for those aging out of the foster care system. When I looked at some of the numbers about those who age out of our foster care system and the amount of homelessness, those who recidivism rate, the ones who go into prison after getting out of the foster care system was staggering, like just truly staggering, about 50% in some instances. Those who get out of foster care system end up as single mothers was staggering. And so I appreciate the state allocating money for organizations such as Angel Share, who help actually get those who age out of the foster care system to get back into the workforce, get back on their feet. You know, the hands up approach. I do appreciate that. So when I just had a minute, I just at least want to make sure I recognize all the work they've done, and hopefully we can kind of keep this fiscal responsibility in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Day, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to yield my time to Senator Michaela Cavanaugh.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you yielded 450.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Day. Well, I appreciate that people are getting up and talking about the budget more so than they did on the previous rounds of debate on the budget. But I do know that there is a more substantive amendment pending, so I would like to withdraw my floor amendment 121.
The amendment is withdrawn. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, some items quickly. New LR 184 from Senator Mosier, that'll be referred to the Executive Board. 185 from Senator Mosier, that'll be referred to the Executive Board as well. 186 from Senator Albright and 187 from Senator Albright. 186 being referred to the executive board, 187 being laid over. Senator Breezy, LR 188, referred to the executive board. Senator Day, LR 189, referred to the executive board. Senator Frederickson, LR 190, referred to the executive board. New A bill, LB 50A, introduced by Senator Wayne. It's bill for enacting new appropriations, appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of legislative bill 50. Concerning LB 813, Mr. President, next item, Senator Conrad would move to return to select the bill to select file for a specific amendment, that being AM 1791.
Senator Bosselman would like to recognize 25 4th through 8th graders and 5 teachers from Fishers Elementary in Schuyler, Nebraska. They are in your north balcony and some underneath the south balcony. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska State Legislature. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning again, colleagues. I know we're getting close to concluding our time on this measure this morning. And as I mentioned before in some introductory comments in doing final review for LB 813 last night, I did see that there was perhaps an opportunity to raise and perhaps address ways to strengthen our safety net when it comes to ensuring childcare for more Nebraskans. So I think that this is a substantive and serious proposal, and I wanted to walk through why I thought it was important. So I think that we do have agreement, even though if it hasn't been reflected in our perhaps overall focus this legislative session, that workforce challenges in Nebraska are our #1 issue. That seems to be the case talking to rural leaders, to urban leaders, to business leaders, to families across the state as well. So in recognition of that challenge, there's a host of different ways to address that. Yes, including tax equity and tax relief that Senator Linehan and the Revenue Committee have brought forward in a host of different measures. But there's also solutions attendant thereto, like childcare, being a primary driver in terms of work support so that we can keep more people in the workforce and bring more people into the workforce. Nebraska consistently has one of the highest percentages of both parents working outside of the home. It consistently has one of the highest percentages of women working outside of the home. We have consistently had one of the lowest unemployment and underemployment rates, unemployment rates in not only our state's history, but I think the nation's in recent years. So how can we address these workforce challenges? So when you look at information from Voices for Children, when you look at information from HHS in regards to the annual market rate survey, looking at the most recent kids count report, we can see that childcare creates a barrier to work. In that report, they noted that about 6% of Nebraskans, which is just shy of 10,000 people, about 10,000 Nebraskans, or about 6% of parents of children 0 to 5, did not take a job, quit a job, or greatly change their job because of childcare problems in the last year. There were about 20,700 kids in Nebraska who received childcare subsidies. In various components, in-home care, child care centers, and through school programs. And one of the ways that we deal with this is we do a market rate survey. I think if it's not every year, maybe it's every other year, to figure out what the cost is for the provision of childcare, and then we direct to do a reimbursement for childcare providers, much like you may be familiar with, like the developmental disability providers that my friend Senator Hansen just talked about very eloquently, and I agree that there's good things happening there this session, or behavioral health providers, or nursing home or other healthcare providers. So we do this provider rate reimbursement. So this is kind of the parallel version in terms of how we address childcare. And Nebraska has made strides in recent years to move from paying a dismal 50% or 60% in terms of reimbursement to child care providers. We've continued to move the needle in the right direction. I believe by statute and in this current budget, as reflected in this substantive amendment, there is an indication we'll be paying our child care providers 75% essentially of what it costs to provide child care. So if we know that we need to grow the safety net, if we know that we need to ensure access to safe, affordable childcare, to ensure kids get their best start in life and that parents have the ability to work at their highest potential in our economy, we should make sure that we're providing reimbursements to childcare providers that actually meet their actual needs. So my amendment would move that from the current 75 percentile to 100%. I am happy to answer any questions and look forward to at least a few minutes of debate before we have a cloture motion on the board this morning. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Vargas, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm not yet sure on Amendment 1791, and I will check in with Senator Conrad here if we do indeed get to a vote before cloture, which I don't know if we will. But I wanted to talk on a couple of different adjustments here. You know, somebody earlier, I can't remember if it was Senator Hansen or somebody talking about the fiscal responsibility with the budget. And I think at least talking about LB 813, I do think it's important. The reason why we have this, and there are substantial sort of mid adjustments we're making in this. The reason we have substantial mid adjustments is if you were a fly on the wall in the Appropriations Committee, we often ask agencies to come to us and then they tell us this is what we need. And then when they are describing their needs for how they're going to spend, you know, we're really taking them to holding them accountable on how they're spending their funds and what they intend to use it for, the historical averages. And, you know, I wish some of you could see that all colleagues weigh in on this, which has been really, especially our new colleagues, weigh in on this. What's important about this is what we've done in the last 2 years. So we're really talking about making changes to the budget from 2 years ago. When we're doing it, we ask the agencies and all the programs to spend wisely, and if they are indeed in need of additional funds for a specific purpose, or if they're indeed in need of more cash fund authority, or spending authority to be able to then do the work of their agency, that they come back and tell us that they need that. The reason why we have sometimes a substantial bill like this and big changes is because they're telling us, hey, we actually realized we need to do a bit more. And that's why we tend to agree with most of the things that are brought to Chairman Clement's point. So many of the things that you see, you know, oftentimes I get somebody asking me, are we putting more within this bill, more money towards housing? I'm like, yes and no. We're not putting more money towards housing. We are realizing that there's more of an unmet need and we can put more money to it. Are we putting more money towards Department of Correctional Services? We are, but largely because they have more needs and then hire more staff, so that we can make sure people are getting the educational services within the correction system, so that they can go and get either the GED coursework or, you know, high school graduation coursework or the mental health services when we don't have those staffing individuals. So what we're doing here is we tell the agencies, be lean, be efficient, and at the same time come back to us when you need more funds, when it's absolutely something that we need to invest in. So this is a representation of those things, as well as sometimes agencies telling us, look, we we maybe overspent. Sometimes they're giving, that's not always reflected in what you see in the adjustments. When they tell us we have more money, we're giving it back, that sometimes happens as well. But oftentimes this is because we have asked them to be fairly lean and we're trying to be fiscally responsible. I still think that there's, and we'll debate this in LB 814, that there's more that we can do outside of education spending, outside of special education funding. And I've said that on the mic several times. And we'll get to that debate here shortly. But for the purposes of this bill, I do want to thank the committee. I want to thank the chairman and others why this is an important set of circumstances on how we approach this. LB 813 is the way that we responsibly ask agencies to come back and tell us we need more money for this reason. We want you to adjust our funding from last year. We want to give you the rationale to it, and we're going to back it up. And it's for the basic things that we really need to make done. This is about making sure DHHS is working more appropriately. This is to make sure that we can continue to improve the housing programs that we have. This is to make sure that we have the staff so that inmates and individuals that are incarcerated have the ability to get the services they need, and we need to do more of that, to Senator McKinney's point, and I support many of the things that he has been saying, to make sure that our state colleges are not running on fumes, to make sure that we are continuing to invest in our site and development fund, that the funds are going out when we have the authority and we give them the authority to do so, and to leverage federal funds when they're coming back in. So since we're having this conversation debate on the bill, and I want to make sure that the public is educated and everybody else is educated, I appreciate your support on this bill. And thank you, everybody, for their comments.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Senator Kavanaugh, please state your point of order.
Prior to us getting to a cloture vote yesterday, there was a point of order made, but it was made after cloture. So for some inexplicable reason, it wasn't acknowledged. But the question was, it's the motion to return to select that's on the board, or is it the motion to return to select and the amendment 1791 that is on the board when we get to cloture? I would like a ruling from the chair as to whether the motion and the amendment are on the board or just the motion itself.
Senator Kavanaugh, please come forward. Senator Kavanaugh, responding to your point of order. We're going to closure. Oh, excuse me. If you go to closure, the motion to return to select file is voted on. The effect of that adoption would be presentation of the amendment. And therefore, the amendment would then be voted on closure.
To overrule the chair.
Senator Kavanaugh and Senator Conrad, please approach. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized for further explanation.
Thank you, Mr. President. As it was explained to me, and I believe I understand accurately, my point of order for clarification on the interpretation or guidance on the rulings was given by the chair, and I appreciate that. And it is a parliamentary inquiry and not a procedural ruling. And so I will withdraw my motion to overrule the chair. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, for a motion.
Mr. President, Speaker Arch would move to invoke cloture on LB 813 pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
Speaker Arch, for what purpose do you rise?
Machine vote.
We are on final reading, so members, please find your seat. All members are present. The motion is to invoke closure. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, Senator Albright, voting yes. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Armendariz, voting yes. Senator Ballard, voting yes. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Boston, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Breezy, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, not voting. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, not voting. Senator Clements, voting yes. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator DeKay, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator Dover, voting yes. Senator Dungan, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Frederickson, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Hansen, voting yes. Senator Hardin, voting yes. Senator Holcroft, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting yes. Senator Hunt, not voting. Senator Ibaugh, voting yes. Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Kauth, voting yes. Senator Linehan, voting yes. Senator Lippincott, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McKinney, not voting. Senator Mosier, voting yes. Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Raybold, voting yes. Senator Reapy, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Wayne, not voting. Senator Wishart, voting yes. The vote is 43 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the motion to invoke cloture.
The closure vote passes. The next vote is to return AM 1791 to select file. There has been a request for roll call. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar, Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Ballard, voting no. Senator Blood, voting no. Senator Boston, voting no. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, voting no. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Breezy, voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator DeKay, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dungan, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting no. Senator Frederickson, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Hansen, voting no. Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Holcroft, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Ibaugh, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting no. Senator Kauth, voting no. Senator Linehan, Voting no, Senator Lippincott. Voting no, Senator Lowe. Voting no, Senator McDonald. Voting no, Senator McKinney. Voting yes, Senator Mosier. Voting no, Senator Merman. Voting no, Senator Raybold. Voting yes, Senator Reapy. Voting no, Senator Sanders. Voting no, Senator Slama. Voting no, Senator Vargas. Senator Vargas voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting no. Senator Walls. Voting no. Voting yes. Senator Wayne. Voting yes. Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is 13 ayes, 35 nays, Mr. President, on the motion to return to select file.
The motion does not pass. Mr. Clerk, the next item is to dispense with the at-large reading. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk, please please do the roll call.
Senator Aguilar. Senator Albright. Voting yes. Senator Arch. Voting yes. Senator Armendariz. Voting yes. Senator Ballard. Voting yes. Senator Blood. Voting yes. Senator Boston. Voting yes. Senator Bostar. Voting yes. Senator Bostelman. Voting yes. Senator Brandt. Voting yes. Senator Brewer. Voting yes. Senator Breezy. Voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting. Senator Clements. Voting yes. Senator Conrad. Voting yes. Senator Day. Not voting. Senator DeBoer. Voting yes. Senator DeKay. Voting yes. Senator Dorn. Voting yes. Senator Dover. Voting yes. Senator Dungan. Voting yes. Senator Erdman. Voting yes. Senator Frederickson. Voting yes. Senator Halloran. Voting yes. Senator Hansen. Voting yes. Senator Hardin. Voting yes. Senator Holcroft. Voting yes. Senator Hughes. Voting yes. Senator Hunt. Not voting. Senator Ibaugh. Voting yes. Senator Jacobson. Voting yes. Senator Kauth. Voting yes. Senator Linehan. Voting yes. Senator Lippincott. Voting yes. Senator Lowe. Voting yes. Senator McDonald. Voting yes. Senator McKinney. Not voting. Senator Mosier. Voting yes. Senator Merman. Voting yes. Senator Raybold. Voting yes. Senator Reapy. Voting yes. Senator Sanders. Voting yes. Senator Slama. Voting yes. Senator Vargas. Voting yes. Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes. Senator Walls. Voting yes. Senator Wayne. Not voting. Senator Wishart. Voting yes. Vote is 43 ayes, 0 nays, Mr. President, to dispense with the at-large reading.
The motion is adopted. The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Mr. President, engrossed legislative bill 813, introduced by Arch at the request of the governor, bill for regulating appropriations, amends laws 2021 LB 380, section 57, 68, and 83, laws 2021 LB 383, section 25, laws 2002, LB 1011, sections 56, 187, 189, 90, laws 2022 LB 1014, sections 34 and 49, laws 1222 LB 1024A, section 3 defines terms to provide change and eliminate appropriations for operation of state government, repeals the original section, declares an emergency.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been compiled with, the question is, shall LB 813 pass with the emergency clause? There's been a request for a roll call. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Senator Albright. Voting yes. Senator Arch. Voting yes. Senator Armendariz. Voting yes. Senator Ballard. Voting yes. Senator Blood. Voting yes. Senator Boston. Voting yes. Senator Bostar. Voting yes. Senator Bostelman. Voting yes. Senator Brandt. Voting yes. Senator Brewer. Voting yes. Senator Breezy. Voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting. Senator Clements. Voting yes. Senator Conrad. Voting yes. Senator Day. Voting yes. Senator DeBoer. Voting yes. Senator DeKay. Voting yes. Senator Dorn. Voting yes. Senator Dover. Voting yes. Senator Dungan. Voting yes, Senator Erdman. Voting yes, Senator Frederickson. Voting yes, Senator Halloran. Voting yes, Senator Hansen. Voting yes, Senator Hardin. Voting yes, Senator Holcroft. Voting yes, Senator Hughes. Voting yes, Senator Hunt. Voting no, Senator Ibach. Voting yes, Senator Jacobson. Voting yes, Senator Kauth. Voting yes, Senator Linehan. Voting yes, Senator Lippincott. Voting yes, Senator Lowe. Voting yes, Senator McDonald. Voting yes, Senator McKinney. Not voting, Senator Mosier. Voting yes, Senator Merman. Voting yes, Senator Raybold. Voting yes, Senator Reapy. Voting yes, Senator Sanders. Voting yes, Senator Slama. Voting yes, Senator Vargas. Voting yes, Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes, Senator Walls. Voting yes, Senator Wayne. Not voting, Senator Wishart. Voting yes. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh voting no.
Mr. Clark.
44 ayes, 2 nays, 2 present not voting, 1 excused not voting. Mr. President, on the passage of LB 813E.
LB 813E passes with the emergency clause. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, a couple of notifications. The Executive Board will meet in room 1525 at noon. Reference Committee will meet in room 1525 immediately following the Executive Board meeting. Additionally, the Government Committee will hold an executive session at noon in room 1507, Government, noon 1507. Mr. President, Senator Albright would move to recess the body until 1:15 p.m.
Yeah, all recess until 1:15. All in favor, vote, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We are recessed.